Greetings. My name is John Savers, and this is Celebration. This is the seventh in the series, an occasional series, and in this particular series, we are taking an affectionate look at diversity and multiculturalism and matters along this line. We have therefore accepted the challenge of the President of the United States in regard to a consideration of this particular subject. Of course, many of you may be chuckling to yourself, saying, well, that's just Billy Jeff Clinton, and everyone knows that he is, in the words of Mr. Charles Lawton, in Witness for the Prosecution, a chronic and habitual liar. But be that as it may, we would still like to go ahead and pursue the challenge put forth by the President of the United States of America, and indeed to take a look at this particular subject, the matter of diversity. We are in favor of diversity, and we think that there are forces which actually are working against this. But at any rate, to set the proper tone, I thought we would take a brief quotation from the President to put it fresh in your mind in case you're not familiar. And we have taken this from the Spotlight, one of those irreplaceably useful tabloids from which one can find much information not found elsewhere. So with no further ado, we will now quote the President. President Bill Clinton has called for a national initiative on race, asking Americans to freely debate racial differences and reach some, presumably, peaceful resolutions to the conflict. However, as the Spotlight has pointed out, and as even the major media has noted, the President has not been truly willing to address the issue head-on. It may well be that Mr. Clinton, however, has a vested interest in this particular subject. Let me put this on the board, and that should be self-explanatory, I think. Perhaps the greatest mystery is a story known to many in Arkansas, but largely ignored elsewhere. It centers on a 12-year-old boy, the son of a street prostitute, whose family and many others in Little Rock claim is the President's illegitimate son. The prostitute's name is Bobby Ann Williams, and in the years that followed her brief moment of infamy in 1992, she has largely dropped out of sight. Bobby Ann Williams was a girl at the very bottom of American society. She was both a prostitute and a drug addict, and a thin and excitable black girl from the Little Rock ghetto who prowled the lonely and deserted streets a mile from the downtown skyscrapers to raise enough money to feed her 2 children. Her regular beat was Spring Street, a dark, tree-lined avenue just a few hundred yards from the mansion that serves as the official home of the state governor and his family. And it was here, one evening in February 1984, that she says she was greeted by a tall, overweight young man in a training suit with a hood pulled down over his face, who was jogging along the pavement. I was with 2 or 3 of the girls, she said some years later, and we all knew right off who the guy was. I guess he had just about the best-known face in Arkansas. This day, we gave him a wave, and he surprised us all by coming over to talk to us. He knew what we were there for, but he was good-natured and grinned a lot, and he asked us all how we were. Then he waved and ran on. But according to Bobby, this wasn't to be their last meeting. 3 days later, she said, he came back, and this time she was alone. To her astonishment, he told her to walk 100 yards down the street and to wait for him behind a row of high hedges. Here, she claimed, she performed a sexual service for her client and asked for a usual price of £45. Instead, he peeled off a wad of notes and gave her 150 pounds. It was to be the beginning of a series of meetings between the prostitute and her distinguished client that went on for over a month. Bobby told everybody about her famous customer, including her husband. Her mother, Sylvia, and her sister, Lucille, warned her to keep quiet, but Bobby insisted on blurting it all out, although she never considered telling the media. The meetings finished at the end of March, and a few weeks later, Bobby found she was pregnant. She told the other girls she was convinced the baby was that of her special white client. At the end of November, her son, Danny, a large baby at 10 pounds, was produced, and he was undoubtedly a mixed race. "Didn't I tell you all?" said a delighted Bobby as her family gathered around her bedside. "Y'all take a look at my boy, and you tell me that he ain't the spitting image of Billy Clinton." It was just another routine story of ghetto life, and Bobby made no attempt to bring troubles down on the head of the man she firmly believed was her baby's daddy. Despite her profession, Bobby was a deeply religious girl, and she accepted all her children as gifts from God, no matter who the fathers were. The story may have ended there, but too many people in the Little Rock ghetto knew about Danny Williams, and as the years rolled by, his looks made him stand out. He was tall, fair-skinned, with a mop of thick curly hair, and everybody remarked on his beautiful smile. And when Governor Bill Clinton decided to run for president, the media began trawling the city grapevine for gossip. It didn't take them long to hear the story of Danny Williams and his mother. Her sister, Lucille, who had once publicly confronted Clinton, screaming to him that he should come clean and admit he had sex with Danny's mother, slammed the door in my face. Around the streets where Bobby lived, there are still plenty of people who will confirm her story, but only one of them will go on record today. But a few $1,000s to a girl like her is a lot of money, and she went along with it. Now, everybody is keeping their mouth shut. Why? Because a lot of juice has been laid out to a lot of people by Clinton's people. That's what he does best, closing the doors on the past. British readers may be mystified that the story has not surfaced here before. The reason is that it has never really been investigated by the liberal mainstream media in America, who have deliberately chosen to ignore or downplay the many scandals affecting Clinton's sex life. Only one down-market tabloid ran it, and although it spent weeks picking over Bobby's story and producing witnesses who saw her with Clinton, the story died without a whimper. The only hard evidence, if it can be called that, is the affidavit taken from her by lawyers and investigators in 1991 after she successfully underwent 2 lie detector tests. Her story contains much graphic detail and gives descriptions of several state troopers who drove her to assassinations with Clinton. 2 of these men backed her story when they, too, later went public with stories of Clinton's almost insatiable womanizing. They never knew Bobby's name, but they drove her and the governor several times, once to a cabin in the hills. It was this particular trip down to the wooded hills around Hot Springs that forms the most compelling part of Bobby's story. For 2 days, she tape recorded an account of that day, describing the car and the driver and giving the exact route. She came up with a clear description of the cabin, a green wood frame building with a black shingle roof and a 30-foot deck overhanging the water. Inside, where she said she and Governor made love, she listed the fixtures and fittings, including the color of the bedspread and various pictures on the wall. Several days later, those who had taken her affidavit followed her directions and found the cabin exactly as described. They put names to the faces of the troopers she mentioned and checked the color and make of the governor's official car. The investigators checked at the land registry office and discovered the cabin had once belonged to Clinton. He had sold it to his mother, Virginia Kelly, and his stepfather for $20,000. The investigators called at the cabin and met Virginia herself, gaining access on the pretext of doing an upbeat story on her son. Inside, they noted that Bobby's description of how the interior had been 7 years earlier was almost an exact match. This particular story appeared in The Truth at Last, it is a citation of an article by James Dalrymple, chief investigative reporter for the London Daily Mail. This is a picture of Danny Williams, Mr. Clinton's alleged son. This is a picture of Bobby Ann Williams, the mother of Danny. Picture on your right side of the monitor is a picture of Billy Jeff Clinton as a lad. And the figure on the left is a picture of Danny Williams as a lad. I think you can see some resemblance here. Incidentally, Danny Williams right now is about 13 years old and is getting a private education in Australia. Now, if the President of the United States is sincere and truly wishes to achieve a long-term peaceful resolution to problems related to this and diversity in general, I second that emotion. We are completely in favor of this, but there are, unfortunately, some indications that this is not absolutely a cinch. We also would like to caution here that under no circumstances are we putting ourselves forth as a spokesperson for white people or European-derived people and so forth. Most of the people who are of this category do not really have any interest in maintaining their national identity, as it were. They would say, who cares? What difference does it make? Well, it does make a difference to me and to a few others, and therefore I think it's worth saying that such people do have a right to have their national continuity, their continuance, as it were. And there are some reasons to think that not everyone is what you would call receptive or kindly intended toward white people. Now, many of you would say, hey, this is crazy, it's far out, it's so silly, this is not real, forget it. So, for this particular reason, I do feel obliged to present certain citations which would tend to, I think, elucidate a little bit this concern to make it clearer, to bring light to it. So with no further ado, let me go forward and give you these quotations, and we'll put them on the board for you to peruse. We must realize that our Jewish party's most powerful weapon is racial tension. By propounding into the consciousness of the dark races that for centuries they have been oppressed by the whites, we can mold them to the program of the Communist Party. In America, we will aim for a subtle victory. While inflaming the Negro minority against the whites, we will endeavor to instill in the whites a guilt complex for their exploitation of the Negroes. We will aid the Negroes to rise in prominence in every walk of life, in the professions, and in the world of sports and entertainment. With this prestige, the Negro will be able to intermarry with the whites and begin a process which will deliver America to our Jewish cause. This was a citation from God's Covenant People, which in turn was citing Israel Cohen's A Racial Program for the 20th Century, which was quoted incidentally by U.S. Congressman Thomas Gerstle Abernathy in the Congressional Record, page 8559. Wow. Well, also please consider this. We Jews have spoiled the blood of the races. We have tarnished and broken their power. We have made everything foul, rotten, decomposed, and decayed. This is, again, a citation from God's Covenant People of a German book, apparently The Way to Zion, a novel by Kurt Munzer, which was quoted in the National Christian News in 1972. Well, now, I'd also like for you to consider this next quotation as the power of this animosity becomes more apparent. Greetings, my children. You have been called here to recapitulate the principal steps of our program, the goal for which we have striven so concertedly for 3,000 years is at last within our reach. Our race will take its rightful place in the world, with every Jew a king and every Gentile a slave. Applause from the gathering. The Russians, as well as the Asiatic peoples, are well under control and offer no objections to war. We are counting heavily on reports of anti-Semitic outrages in Russia to whip up the indignation in the United States. We shall stage anti-Semitic outbreaks in several of their largest cities, exposing reactionary sectors in America, which then can be silenced. We will arbitrate, sending our control commission. This war will end for all time our struggle against the Gentiles. Our control commission will, in the interest of peace, in wiping out interracial tensions, forbid whites to mate with whites. The white woman must cohabit with members of the dark races, the white men with black women. Thus, the white race will disappear. The end of the white man and our most dangerous enemy will become only a memory. We shall embark on an era of 10,000 years of peace and plenty, the Pax Judaica, and our race will rule undisputed over the earth. Our superior intelligence will easily enable us to retain mastery over a world of dark peoples. This last citation was taken from Doc Scott's Free at Last, in which he cited a keynote speech given by Rabbi Marcus Eli Ravage at a meeting of a prominent Jews in Budapest, Hungary on January 1, 1952. Now, I certainly don't think that such views are held by a great majority of Jewry. I think it is a particular and highly eccentric point of view, and hence do not put any kind of burden of guilt, if you will, on our friends in Jewry. I myself have been well treated by Jews, and I expect the same is true for you, and therefore I dismiss this as any kind of general animosity. Of course, many Jews have taken European-derived people for wives and so forth, so the idea of this profound hostility seems absurd. But still, these quotes are there, and therefore it is fair to wonder why, who, how does this come to be? And I've thought about this and pondered this, and it's very hard to understand why there is this desire to see a world without white people. But in speculating on this, and this is precisely what it is, speculation, and again, standing as always upon the shoulders of people who are learned. I certainly don't claim this, but there is a certain theory, a rationale that might explain this sector within Jewry which is so hostile to the European-derived people. And the concept is this, that there is very sound evidence that the Israelites, the 10 tribe, and plus the 200,000 of Judah, migrated from Assyria in captivity westward through a number of avenues, around the Caspian and Black Sea, over the Caucasian Mountains, and also via the Mediterranean, and that this flood all regathered in the Western European area, the Isles of the West, Britannica, Hibernia, and that there they also found some much earlier representations of Israelite migration, because the Israelites were also a seagoing people, Dan, the tribe Dan, and so forth. And the tin mines of Britannica and the mines of Iberia were certainly known to these people, and they certainly had settlements and so forth, trading spots and whatnot. But at any rate, the idea here is that for the most part, the identity of these people was pretty much lost, who they were, but not altogether. So it is theorized that a segment of Jewry, that is, that segment which the Jewish historian Josephus describes as Idumean, and Idumea is the new name for Edom, and Edom is the name for Esau. So that the seed of Esau found its way into Jewry, and Herod, for instance, was an Idumean, an Edomite Jew, and there must have been many. And we also have noticed in the Gospels one occasion in which, in a debate, Pharisees in a debate with Yahshua, said that we have never been bondsmen. Of course, any Israelite would have been a bondsman because he would have been in Egypt. But an Edomite would not have been, and an Edomite Jew, therefore, could fairly say we have never been bondsmen. But the idea here is that since Esau and Jacob have struggled from the womb onward, it is reasonable to assume that that struggle is meant to continue, and in fact does continue. And that Esau, or the representative of Esau's seed, the Edomite or the Idumean Jews, set forth westward also with a notion of the destruction of Jacob Israel, the seed thereof. The idea here is that if Jacob Israel could be destroyed, the seed made of none effect, then Esau could rightfully claim once again the blessings, the inheritance lost from Isaac in that well-known episode. Now, some people would say, this is just so far-fetched, I can't believe it, rolling their eyes and so forth. But attorneys who are familiar with inheritance disputes can pretty much understand how this kind of bloody vendetta might occur. But at any rate, this is one theory of why this desire to get rid of white people may exist in segments of Jewry. And so we would isolate this particular matter as being basically, insofar as it's not Masonic, Sephardic, and within the Sephardic Jewry, one would find the Idumean Jews, and it may be that it is this group which carries this intense animosity toward the seed of Jacob Israel, which is to be found in the Celto-Germanic people. Be that as it may, you may also say, what? Say what? So just to let you know that there are reasons to consider this as a possibility, attend to the following. The discovery of Israel's modern-day identity is becoming very widespread, as demonstrated by the Israeli Yair Davidi. In 1994, Mr. Davidi testified to the Israelite roots of the Celto-Saxons. Most of the ancient Israelites assimilated to foreign cultures and forgot their origins. In the course of time, they reached the British Isles and northwest Europe, whence related nations such as the USA were founded. Most of the ancient Israelites were exiled and lost their identity. Their Celto-Saxon descendants are to be found mainly amongst the Gentile peoples of North America, Northwest Europe, Australasia, that's Australia, and South Africa. These claims are not far-fetched. They are supported by biblical, historical, and other evidence, much of which is, in effect, even recognized by the academic world, which simply has not sufficiently correlated the information in its possession and not drawn the necessary conclusions from the proof it already acknowledges. The Israelites were transported en masse, first mainly to areas in northern Mesopotamia and to Hara, and from those regions they later moved northward into Scythia, whence they migrated in several waves to the extreme north and west of Europe, from which their Celto-Saxon descendants settled North America, Australasia, that's Australia, and South Africa. The descendants of the northern Hebrews today must be sought for in Europe and in the countries to which they later migrated more than anywhere else. And so on this interesting note, we now conclude this particular program, our number 7 in the celebration series. In this particular series, we have seen that there are forces which are extremely hostile toward white people or the European-derived people. We do not fully understand this hostility, but we do know that amongst these people we find the forces of Freemasonry, separate sector of Jewry, which we suppose to be Idumean Sephardim in background, and of course we find a large segment of the black community. Incidentally, it should be pointed out that good people do not really promote genocide, don't commit genocide. Therefore, to ask that these people be made whole, and I ask you to join me in this silent prayer with which we'll end this particular program.